Okay, first off, you're going to want to take pictures of your picture book, and then you're going to probably want to edit it using the editing software on your phone. You'll also maybe want to rotate it around so that it fits vertically. Now, you are going to lose some of your image because it's going to automatically fill the entire screen with your image. The Ken Burns effect is going to allow you to make up for a little bit of that, so you can start the image someplace and then have it zoom in to a new image or new part of the image. 5-Minute Fairy Tales. Copyright 1999, Publications International Limited. Louis Weber, CEO of Publications International Limited, Lincolnwood, Illinois. Cover illustrated by Jane Mayday. Cover border illustrated by Wendy Elson. St. George and the Dragon, illustrated by Tammy Spear Lyon, adapted by Brian Conway. Narration by Kurt Dreier. This is the tale of St. George and the Dragon. It has been told for over 15 centuries. It takes place during a time called the Dark Ages, when kings ruled the land, wizards cast spells, and monsters roamed free. The Queen of Fairies had taken young George in as a baby. The fairies raised the child to grow up brave and strong, calm, courteous, quick and clever. They taught him to be a noble knight. At last, the time came when George was old enough to seek out his destiny. The Queen of Fairies called him to see her. Your journey starts today, she told him. You have many adventures ahead. Your fantastic quest will take 6 years. The Queen of the Fairies spoke kindly to George. The world is full of monsters and battles. You will meet kings and paupers, wizards and witches, evil princes and kind princesses, she said. George was sad to leave the land of the fairies, but he was not afraid. Always remember one thing, the Queen added, tapping George's silver battle helmet. Your greatest weapon, George, is your brain. Then George set off. He traveled for weeks. As he approached Selene, he noticed the land changed from lush and green to dark and desolate. It seemed the ground had crossed by fire. There was no grass, only the darkest mud. The trees were bare and black, and a foul stench filled the air. As George walked through this stark land, he did not see a living thing. Then George finally saw a castle in the distance. A high, solid wall enclosed the castle and the small city around it. The gate was closed up tight. When he got closer, he saw a young lady. She crept quietly through the gate and up to George. "Have you no sense?" she asked. "You would do well to leave here and never return." "But I am a brave knight, here to help you," George whispered. "Alas, sir," the woman replied, "you are but one man. I fear that you cannot help." George looked at her and said, "It is my destiny. I will do all that I can, even if it costs me my life." "I am Princess Sabra," she said. "Come with me." Sabra explained why the kingdom lived in such fear. A fearful dragon had lived in the kingdom for many years, she had told him. The horrible beast had ravaged the land and eaten all the animals. Princess Sabra told George that the people had moved within the castle walls for protection. But soon the dragon had run out of animals to eat. The dragon had promised to come through the castle walls for his breakfast when the animals were gone, she told him. "We gave up our last 2 sheep this very morning," said the princess. "Tomorrow we shall all perish." "Then my timing is perfect," said George. They came to a cave in the dark forest where a wise old hermit lived. Sabra and George crept into the old hermit's house, who stared into his fire. He did not turn to look at them. Suddenly the hermit spoke. Long ago, it was told, 2 brave knights would come to know the only way to save the rest. "The serpent's weakness is in his breath," said the hermit. With those words, an ancient hourglass appeared at their feet. George did not understand. He asked the strange man, but the hermit would speak no more. Then George and Sabra left the cave. It was already dark. They knew they must hurry to the dragon's lair. They had to get there while the dragon slept. It was their only chance. "The hermit speaks in puzzles," Sabra sighed. What do we do with this ancient timepiece? George remembered that the Queen of the Fairies had told him his best weapon was his brain. He studied the hourglass. The hourglass will lead us, George whispered. We must wait until all the sand has dropped. The smell as they approached the lair was horrible. George and the princess used George's shield to protect themselves from the dragon's fiery snores. Suddenly, the dragon stirred. The dragon raised up and rubbed his eyes. George watched the dragon rise, and the very last grain of sand dropped through the hourglass. At that moment, the dragon yawned a great fiery yawn. "Now, George!" Sabra shouted. George threw the hourglass into the dragon's mouth. The hourglass broke apart in the dragon's tongue in a cloud of icy mist. The dragon was really angry now. It looked down to see George and Sabra duck behind the shield. The dragon reared back to hurl a fiery blast at them, but only soft snow came from its mouth. The dragon took a deep breath and tried again, but his mouth shut tight with ice. The dragon jumped into the deep, warm lake to keep from freezing from the inside out. That dragon never bothered another soul. Some have seen him coming up for air on occasion, but only on very warm nights. The dragon would not dare stay out of the warm water too long for fear of becoming an icy giant statue. George and Sabra had saved the kingdom. It was Sabra who was the second knight that the old hermit had spoken of in his strange riddle. The two arrived at the castle to cries of joy and triumph. The graceful people of Salim were no longer prisoners in their own kingdom. The king offered George all that he had in thanks, but George wanted no payment. "I have more adventures left to face," George told the people. "They are my greatest reward." George shared the story of the Dragon of Salim to anyone who asked along his journey, and it is still told today as an example of bravery.